we can kick off. All right, guys. Hey, how's it going? Hello, hello,
Hi
hello.
there.
Hey, it's Barb here from Barb's Bookland now. How are we all doing? This is my third week of Indie August Indie Author Roundtables. How are we all doing? Hopefully, you guys are in the comments and you'll say for a quick chat for an hour with these lovely people I have with me here. Just to start off, then, if I can go round the table and just if you guys can just quick brief introduction as to who you are, what releases you have, if the new releases backlist, whatever, and just a quick sort of summary of what your books are about then. So whoever wants to go first can work away.
I'll go first. Oh,
Okay.
actually, you should go first. You're before me in the.
Okay. My name is William. I go by W.J. Long the third on my books as an author. I have been working on a sci-fi series called the Silver Sight Saga. The book one, which is currently out right now, is called Children of the Black. Book two is this one right here. It's The Hound of Gravor. It will be out in September 10th. So that's pretty much me. I guess I could say that I was a finalist in the SBSFC 3 for Children of the Black. And I'm fairly new to the indie author thing. These are my first two books. So
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well done for finalist as well.
thank you.
That's amazing. Rachel, what about you?
Hi, I'm Rachel Aaron. I am the author of Hell for Hire, as well as Nice Dragons Finish Last, 2K to 10K, and everything else you see over here. I have mini-series. I've been both traditionally and indie published. And I write a lot of books. So that's me.
Okay.
I also write sci-fi under Rachel Bach. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Nick, what about yourself?
Well, I've been writing for about a year and a half, but I write quite quickly, so I have written quite a few. I started off with the Hostile Contact series, of which there's 8. They took about a year to write, and within those, basically, it's I don't know how to describe it. It's an action fantasy with military undertones, but more towards like an episodic approach to writing sci-fi. So each one was a self-contained book as it went along. And then recently, the last few months, I've just diversified a little bit, and I've dived into. I haven't got a nice bookshelf behind me, as you can tell. I diversified into a bit of climate fiction, The Scorching, which is currently in the indie sale at the 99 cents, 99 pence. And that one is probably me experimenting something wider than military sci-fi, trying to just push my boundaries as well, and just trying to interest the reader in something slightly different. That's my first person point of view book, so a bit of a risk for me. And then I diversified again just recently, and that's the latest release, which is The Dragon of the Veil, which is a dark fantasy arcane punk type mashup. And we'll see where that goes. That's only just come out. And that's me. That's where I am.
And brilliant. That's amazing. And Morgan, what about yourself then? Hi, Morgan.
Hi. So my name's Morgan Shank. I'm a dark fantasy writer. I was just explaining to the lovely group here that I'm currently just plopped down in the middle of downtown, so I don't actually have a bookshelf, and I forgot to bring copies of my books. So I hope this isn't too tacky, but I can
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah,
on the phone.
That looks good.
So I did the Low Country trilogy. It's a fantasy western series. So if you like the Wild West and you like fantasy, except instead of pistols, you got crossbow pistols. And then also I got here, this is my newest release. So it's the newest in a dark fantasy trilogy that I've started on. And so that one released May, so a couple months back. And I'm currently working on revisions for the sequel. So dark fantasy writer, I love fantasy in all flavors. It's going a little bit slower now because, surprise, surprise, multi-character chonker dark fantasy books take longer to write, get all the character arcs and everything organized. So it's going a little bit slower now, but I'm working on the sequel with the third to be following right after.
Fabulous. That's what we want to hear. Just keep writing those books and we'll keep reading them.
That's the idea.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's fab. Yeah, so that, I mean, I've got copies of all of it. I mean, Kindle Unlimited, I think the Narrates indie sale at the moment's a really, really good one because there's quite a lot of hidden gems and books maybe that you wouldn't maybe normally pick up or buy, which are heavily discounted, which I think is absolutely fantastic because it just puts more of the books into more people's hands and more visibility and everything. So I think it's a fantastic thing for just this weekend, you know. But one question, okay, so I have a quick question just coming off you guys talking to me about your books and things. William, obviously you're writing, you know, that series that you have ongoing at the moment. There's 2 books, there's one due out next month. The rest of you guys, you obviously have diversified your writing and you've gone from different genres and written, you know, different genres, trilogies on different things. What made you do? Did you always think you were going to do that, or did you want to stick to the one sort of either fantasy, you know, sci-fi, all that good stuff, or was it always the plan where you would try to write different sort of, you know, genres for each of your you know, series or books or whatever? You know, what made you go into changing what you'd already done before? Does that make sense? Makes sense in my head. Rachel, do you wanna?
I'd love to start because there was no plan. I just wrote the book that I thought was super cool at the time, and it actually, career-wise, it was a very bad idea. Like writing art-wise, I had a great time. I have written urban fantasy is primarily what I write, but I've written science fiction under Rachel Bach. I also wrote a Western fantasy called The Last Stand of Mary Goodcrow, which I think is one of the best things I've ever written, but didn't sell very well because here I am jumping genres. But I say I mostly write urban fantasy, and staying in one genre is definitely the best financial decision. But you know, it's not all about, if I wanted to just make money, there are easier ways to just make money than writing. And I'm a firm believer in you should write the story that is the best story at the time.
Yeah.
Always give the best. And that is why I jumped. And despite it not being the best idea, and also, like, for example, I said I wrote sci-fi under Rachel Bach. That was actually back when I was published with Orbit Books. And I had just written The Legend of Eli Monpress, which is traditional fantasy. And I was like, I want to write powered armor, but there's kissing. And my editor was like, do you really though? Do you really want to do that? And I was like, yeah, here's the book. And she was like, I love this book, but we can't publish it under your name. And that's why I had to change my name. And I fought her really hard on that and I lost. And, but part of the joy of being indie is you have enough rope to hang yourself. You can publish whatever you want. And I've never had a real flop, but I've definitely had books that have done worse than other books. But there is a balance between the book of your heart, which you really want to do, and the book that you probably should do. Because, you know, if I listened to my fans, I'd still be writing my Heartstriker series. And while I'm sure they would love Dragons Forever, I don't have anything else to say. I've said it all. So moving on.
Fair enough. Nick, what about you?
I probably just took the rope and hung myself with it, to be honest with you. In terms of that, I think obviously I wrote an 8-book series, so in terms of military sci-fi, and I wanted to move away from that type of concept, do something completely different. Against all advice, as Rachel was saying, it's just the last thing anybody wants you to do in terms of where you should be going. But I needed to go and do something different. I could have chosen to go under a different name, but in the end, it was still sci-fi, so it's well diversified to the Scorching. And in a way, I had somebody, a close friend, who helped me with that, and it was really important for them. So it was 2 things at once in that way. Does it sell anywhere near as the military sci-fi? Nowhere near, but may do. I think that's the other side of looking at it. At the moment, it hasn't picked up, but maybe it will in the future. And also, I've always loved dark fantasy, right across the board, from very early, the Michael Moorcock type stuff through to the Joe Abercrombie that's current now.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always a wish of mine. And actually, when I wrote Hostile Contact, it started off as a fantasy. I dumped that manuscript and then rewrote it as Hostile because it was easier for me. I think Morgan was saying multiple characters, all the point of views that was going on. As a beginner, it was too much for me.
Mm-hmm.
But wanted to go back to that. So that's why I made that attempt into dark fantasy. And actually, at the end of it, I think it's a really, really good book. I think it will do well once people see it and pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it still has that action type focus, which is where my other books were. So I think that need to try something new in combination with timing. In terms of will I drag my fans with me? I doubt I'll get that military sci-fi switch over to dark fantasy with climate fiction in between. But then that's, having a diverse portfolio might help in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. And Morgan, what about yourself? Obviously going from the Western type side of things into then, the new release, what sort of pushed you to do that?
Well, so that's an interesting story because I had always been interested in the epic dark fantasy. And it was kind of like the Western fantasy was an accident because so I started writing when I was in middle school, and I hand wrote a composition notebook. I hand wrote a novel in that book. And then from there, I just kept going. And I really bad wanted to be a writer and have a completed book. But as I'm sure that the other authors can attest, you overthink your skill when you're first starting out, or you overestimate it. And so I had a lot of work to do. And I spent forever working on a fantasy trilogy, and it was getting nowhere. And it was just a flop and a flop and a flop. And I was kind of frustrated after a while, and I was like, okay, I have this vision for this project, but I'm obviously not skilled enough to tackle it yet. But I don't want to not write. And then I was getting kind of interested in a Western approach, like the Wild West, do something with that genre. And I was like, well, I can't do that and pivot away from dark fantasy because I've already been branding myself as a dark fantasy writer and telling everyone that I'm writing dark fantasy. And so then it was kind of one day I was like, oh, well, what if you just pivot sort of halfway and do a Wild West, but keep it fantasy?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of experimented and did a mind vomit, so to speak. And then early readers seemed to like it. And so I just kind of kept rolling with it. And it became the full trilogy. It borrowed off of some characters that I had used in a different trilogy that never made the cut and just transplanted them in a genre hybrid. And it seemed to work pretty well. And so after that, I was like, okay, maybe I'm talented enough to try this dark fantasy thing again. So now I'm retrying the original project, and so far people seem to like the first installment. So far it seems to be on the right track. And so, it was just trial by error. I just kept throwing stuff together, and eventually something stuck.
Yeah, hoping for the best. That's good. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And William, can I just ask, obviously, you have the second in your series is due to come out here very shortly. Have you had any thoughts about moving genres or going away from when this is written, this series is finished? Have you any plans to move to any other sort of genre, or
I have I don't want to get locked into sci-fi. I love it. Don't get me wrong, but I think that I just generally consider myself a genre author in terms of like a genre movie, right? So somewhere in horror, supernatural, action, sci-fi, fantasy in that regard, right? I am in fact working on a paranormal kind of thriller for right now in the middle between. I had some issues with Greyboar. Getting that one done, and I wanted to take a little bit more time, slow down a bit, and make sure my my plotting was good for the next one because I had so many. Like I'd get up to 300 pages and start over, and then it just realized it wasn't working. I had to go back and go back and go back, and so I wanted to have a better runway up to book 3.
Mhm.
And I said in the meantime, I was going to honor a request my wife had made. We were still dating. She asked me to finish the story Clearwater Falls I've been working on, and I promised that I would. And here we are, about 16 years later, and I'm like, okay, it's time to get that done.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a great story. Yeah, no, definitely. There's not really any genres that I don't particularly like reading, to be fair. So anything you guys are going to spit out, I'm going to read. So just to let you know, that's where I'm at with everything.
Don't encourage us.
Say again.
Don't encourage us. We should. Be
No, I want to encourage you guys. That's what I'm here for. I'm only one person, but I can read. It's fine. I can read everything. Don't be worried about it. We've got a few people in the comments. Then Annette says that the Narrative sale has filled her TBR for the next year. I think on X Twitter, literally the amount of people that I follow and people that are talking about this indie sale is ridiculous. It's amazing. It's a really, really good thing that's being done there too. Big hello to Morgan and Rachel. Hello. And Morgan has said hello back. Fingers crossed, Morgan, and congratulations on your new book release. Yes, I second that. All right, so question for all the authors here. Do they focus on genre when they begin writing their stories, or does that come later when trying to market it on the various book platforms? Anybody?
I know that I start with genre, but that is because I've been doing this for a long time. Back at the beginning, I just wrote whatever I liked, and I was a giant nerd, so I wrote a lot of fantasy, and I watched a lot of anime, and so a lot of my fantasy had big anime fights in them because I like that stuff. I still like that stuff. But at this point in my career, I generally make a giant idea bucket. And then when it's time to start a new series, I'll go through and say, what am I excited about that fits my brand? Because there's a ton of ideas. Like I've got a great idea for a zombie horror novel that I will never write because I only have one and it doesn't match anything else I do. And so I'm at the point in my career, because I've been doing this for a bit, I'm at the point in my career where I do pick and choose depending on what's marketable. But earlier in my career, I did not. And I kind of missed that freedom. And sometimes I think I should maybe loosen up a little bit because one of the problems with being indies is that you have to be all parts of the business. So you've also got to be, the marketing person who says, you really want to write that. You've got to stand in and sometimes pull yourself back, but maybe that zombie novel is amazing. So I would say it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, my readership gets more of what they want. But on the other hand, maybe I'm not writing something amazing that I could be writing if I was genre blind. So yeah, kind of my thinking on it.
I think from my point of view, it's I start with the genre has to be the beginning part of it. Unfortunately, I'm probably the pantser in me will just take me on from there. It ends up diversifying out. So I may start, for instance, the Dark Fantasy may have started as a focus on it being a fancy structure, quite grim in places. But I can't help myself. Somewhere along the line, something will happen, and there's arcane punk that creeps in, and other elements that are going to creep in later on. And there'll be some elements of horror that might slip in there because that's just where the story takes me as I write it. So it generally will start off with a key focus that even the military sci-fi, the first book, was very much structured hostile contact around a drop and go incursion. But I can't help adding depth to that. So the later books, we started off with a 50,000 word first book. The last book was 130,000 words. Because it didn't come to an end. It had to continue structurally. I could have cut it short, but then it wouldn't have worked. So it changed as an author and changed as a writer as I'm going through that genre. So I think I probably start with that focus on it, but then the story will take me somewhere else, or the story arc, the trilogy, or however long the series tends to add elements outside of that. And I know that a lot of people, the marketing side of it probably doesn't do me any good. But then, at this point in time, I'm small. Is it a career, or is it is it what else I do keeps feeding into that, keeps writing the books? And I think that's the advantage for me of being an indie. At the moment, I'm still exploring what I enjoy writing.
Brilliant.
All right. I am pretty free with what I do. So like I tried my hand at screenwriting for many years, and so I wrote all kinds of stuff. But when it comes to writing books and stuff like that, I'm fairly new to the idea, and so I just kind of write what I feel because it's such an investment that I want to be excited about what I'm doing, and I don't want to do it because I think it will sell very well. I want to do it because I want to do it, and so like that's kind of the focus here, and maybe that's the wrong approach to take. I don't really have much of a readership to let down at this point, so I just kind of go for I go for broke and see what happens. I like to think that I create a universe or a world in which these genres, romance, horror, all that stuff exists in this space, and so it just really depends on how the universe shrugs as to where our characters line up. Do they meet the right person or not? Do they find themselves in a derelict spaceship or not? And what's going on in there is kind of just, I guess that like, I couldn't say that it's, that I don't adhere to a genre specifically, in that regard.
If I can just jump in on there, I've read both of William's books. Which are excellent. They have a superb sci-fi structure to them, relationship structure. There's almost in the complexity of characters that Morgan was talking about as well. In the fantasy, there is strong depth there. And they are books that need to be read. Sorry, well, I'm going to have to jump in because I haven't read them both. They are excellent. It didn't get to the final. I knew the reason that it was a fine book, and the second one is built on that even further. So I can back up what he's saying about the genre. It says sci-fi. It might even an element that begins with a military sci-fi bent to it, but it takes you so many different places. So there's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Yep, I concur. I agree. Morgan, yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm basically in the same spot as William in that I realized eventually like indie publishing was a valid way to get my story out into the world. And then after a few releases, I also realized that the most important thing to me is just being able to write the story, because I have enough other interests outside of writing and reading that this, at least right now, is not what I'm trying to make a career in, and I've made peace with that. I like that. I like that spot. It lets me keep it as a passion. It lets me pour into it and chase what excites me. And in the future, I would love to have it be the full-time thing, but at least for right now, it's my passion, and I'm happy with that. And there's a quote that I've always liked by Howard Thurman. It's my favorite quote. He says, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do it, because what the world needs is people who have come alive." And so that's how I've kind of looked at all of my story ideas so far. Is I've asked myself, what am I most excited about? And then that's where I start. And then following that to its logical conclusion, that kind of shapes the genre around it as I'm unpacking the story idea in my head. And so because I'm most interested in fantasy and fantasy subgenres, that tends to be the genre that I continue to go back to. I like reading sci-fi, but it's never been a passion for me to write and create a story out of. And so I just never try sci-fi. But fantasy is the one that always makes me tick. And so that's what I continue to come back to. And that pretty well establishes most of the genres. It's some flavor of fantasy usually. And that's how the fantasy Western came to be, was because I realized I was telling a Western story in terms of trope and archetypes. But then I was also like, I couldn't let magic go because I like that too much. And so I was like, okay, well, let's just combine them, and that's how it made that subgenre.
Yeah. And just following off that, then something that I'm really interested in sort of finding out is how you're talking about the passion, Morgan, for writing, and it's still always there because you have enough going on sort of in the forefront, you know, to keep you going. It's not your career right now, but how do you keep the passion alive for writing? How do you get where do the ideas come from for each of the books each time you go to write something? You know, what's pushing you to write? How did you get into writing in the first place? And you know, do you feel as if once the passion leaves, or once the sort of enjoyment or novelty wears off or whatever, you will stop writing, or will you know, do you still feel that you'll keep pursuing and trying to, you know, write more? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you know what I mean? Like what drives you guys to just keep writing, you know?
Well, is this a formal question or a question for Morgan?
No, just for everyone. Yeah, no, just
that's what I was like wanting to. I was like,
sorry. Just coming off Morgan sort of saying about the passion for the writing, you know, I just was sort of wondering to you guys, you know, what keeps you going, really, you know?
Well, as Morgan said, like I am also extremely focused on what I find interesting, what I find entertaining. My very first customer and my very first reader is always myself. If I'm not having a good time, then we're not doing this. There's I cannot make someone else have a good time if I'm not having fun. Okay. And also, real brief, shout out to Mahir from Fantasy Book Critic, who's in the he has been a tireless champion of indie publishing, indie fantasy, indie everything. And he has supported me from my very, very first book. So thanks, Mahir. Just wanted to say hi.
Lovely to have you here.
Awesome.
Lovely.
But yeah, like I wanted to be a writer from as soon as I can remember, and I was constantly told no one actually becomes a writer, which is ridiculous because how do books get written? And like my parents were supportive, but anytime I would tell anyone I want to be a writer, it was don't quit your day job, don't get too invested, you have a better chance of making it in the NBA, all of these things. And I'm contrary, and I just did it anyway. And yeah, exactly. And it worked. And I've been this has been my full-time career since 2008, and I'm still waiting to have to get a real job.
Nice.
Yeah.
But,
very good.
Yeah, but it's if I could do anything else, I would, because this is a very difficult career. It's very lonely. I mean, their entire days, and I don't talk to anyone outside of my immediate family. It is very financially unstable because sometimes your book will do great and sometimes it won't, but the bills are the same. It's very difficult. You have to do, especially in indie, it's up and down. You have to do so much work that you're not really prepared or qualified to do, but you have to do it anyway. But at the same time, there's no job I'd rather have, because when the writing is good, there is no better feeling. There is nothing better than when you nail it and you're like, yes. And then when someone says, I loved your book, or when someone says, I stayed up all night reading your book, that's my favorite, knowing I made someone late for work. Wow.
I love that.
Knowing that you ruined their life, that they were I consumed them.
My favorite, sometimes they'll be on Goodreads, like live tweeting the book. That's my favorite. I actually always stalk those. Now people are going to be worried about doing it. I promise I don't say anything. But I love it because at my heart, I'm an entertainer. I write these books to make other people feel the way I feel when I write them. I'm like, this is awesome. And I'll be like doing the dishes or driving my kid to school, and I'll come up with this amazing idea for a book, and I can't not write it. Like, even if no one read my books, I'd probably still write them because I can't not do it.
Yeah.
And I will probably do this until I die. But that passion is really precious and wonderful. And so that's why, like, I constantly, I go on Reddit a lot, and I talk to writers on Reddit because I'm a firm believer in paying it forward. You know, I worked a lot. I worked very hard to get the experience I've got, and I learned a lot of things the hard way. And if I could help other people not learn the hard way, that would be great. But one of the things that I constantly stress people, like, oh, I published my book and no one read it, and I'm so upset. And I'm like, just keep going. You just got to keep going, because every one of those books is backlist. Every one of those books builds you up, and you build readership like a mountain. And the more books you write, the more chances you are you're going to become someone's favorite author, and then they're going to read all your backlist. And it took me 15 years to write all the books I have, but I've had people who've read my entire backlist in a month. So it's not like people are going to run out of need for authors. And so I think that the most important thing you can do as a writer is to just keep going and have faith and belief in your ideas. Because if you think it's cool, there's probably a lot of other people who think it's cool. And to just keep pushing on that and just not give up your dreams, no matter what bitter people tell you.
That's really inspiring. That's really cool.
So
Thanks, Rachel. That's really cool. That would have been a good question for if you had to give any sort of up and coming writers who are thinking of dipping their toe in. Any advice? What would you say? So that was a good answer, Rachel. There.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. Yeah, never go up on your dreams. Next, what about you? Any?
Oh, yeah, mine would be don't follow what I do. In terms of advice, I think my passions come from a different place. So I spent 35 years working with kids as a teacher and a head teacher, working with particularly early years and autistic children. And I think the thing I learned there was the enjoyment of story and storytelling. And so it's something that I engage with an awful lot, making up our own stories as well as everything else and engaging the children in that process. And then working in the later years, really succinctly on teaching children to read as a very structured focus and the enjoyment of the written word. But I wrote a fantasy probably when I was about 24, 25, which I burnt somewhere. It's just in the tray, it's gone and it will never be returned to. But after we all went through that, but we went through a very difficult period with COVID in the UK, particularly the way schools were having to handle children. And at the end of all of that, and then the end of all of trying to keep children safe, staff safe, and all the stress that went with all those parts, I took early retirement. And then I found I had nothing to do. And then one New Year's Eve night, when maybe I had a glass or too much of wine, it was, didn't you write a book once? And it was that moment, I think, that it actually came back. Through all the stress of COVID, I really went back to reading, read an awful lot of sci-fi and fantasy, but not the deep genres. It had to be very light because my brain was engaged with everything else in terms of what was going on and looking after the staff and children and parents. So that ignited me again in the interest in terms of writing. And that's why I think probably the military sci-fi was the first thing I wrote, because that's what I was reading. It was all stuff that it kept you in a different place all the time. And that passion for writing, I mean, I started January the 12th, 2023. So I finished that series, published the last one on the 24th of January 2024. So that's somewhere around 600,000 words in that time. So it was a real, I've got to get, this is it. This is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to work, and the process. And then I realized I was in that, I let all that go. And I think that's probably when we talked earlier about switching genre. By the way, don't switch genre, but I did. Don't do it, but I've done it. Because I needed just to let off that gas of what I'd done. And just to see what I'd learned in that time. I think very much I learned in the arena of readership about how to write, what I was writing, what readers I would engage with. And I needed to go and try something new as well. So my passion's still there. It slowed down. I was writing somewhere around 3,000-4,000 words a day, but now we write at that pace, but then we take a break and then move on from there rather than a continuous cycle. But my advice in terms of keeping that passion going is very much what Rachel said. It's got to interest you. There is writing to market, and I think that's very, very important if you want to make it more than just a passion thing. But you can still do that and really, really enjoy it. You can still do that and take yourself away on that journey of this characters and story that you've written about. And And I think that's probably the learning process I'm going through now before going back and having a look at the ideas I've got for a space opera after these.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I can't not do this. I started writing when I was in grade school. I discovered that, I was bored in class, and I discovered the easiest way to get the teacher to leave you alone and not pay attention was to write something in your notebook. And so that's kind of how it started for me. So they just kind of left me alone, and as soon as I was taking notes.
30 years ago.
But yeah, I wrote a lot, and then I kind of fell out of it, and then I got obsessed with my vision and what I want people to see. Instead of, I don't want you to. I got to the point where I didn't want people to imagine what they imagined. I want them to imagine what I imagined, and that was tricky. So I started writing screenplays and trying to do the film thing for a while, and I had some moderate local success with that, and then I had a stroke and came out of work, and things went kind of. I didn't know what to do, so I said, okay, well, my wife was like, she had told me before earlier on that I should write books. I should write books because then you don't have to worry about whether you can find the money to produce it or whatever, right? You can just, when you write the end, it's the end, right? And so it's not that way, but it's pretty close. And so so I started writing books, and I went back to some of the old stories that I had written before and tried to adapt them into screenplays, or adapt old screenplays into novels. And Children of the Black is that, but I expanded it greatly. So I'm still in the process of doing that, of taking some of my old screenplays, maybe even some of my old stories from notebooks when I was a kid, and reinterpreting them into this as I am now. And so I have stuff. Just doing that, I think I could write for the rest of my life. But there's always new ideas, and I love doing that.
Brilliant. I love hearing that. Morgan, what about yourself?
Yeah, so it sounds like we almost were running with two questions, sort of. And so, the first, if you were to say anything to an up and comer, I would say, your story won't let you go for a reason, and you owe it to yourself and to everyone around you to see what that reason is. To just finish it and see what it's doing and why it matters. I just think there's no like a novel or a literary work, like manga, comic book, a novel. To me, that's like the most powerful medium in the world, because we connect to story and we connect to characters, and you can throw around statistics all day long, but if you try to get someone's attention by constructing a story and a emotional need around something, that draws people in, because we're relational people, because we're emotional people, because all of us empathize with character and story. And so I just think it's the most powerful medium that's out there, and there's no one that's ever going to tell it quite like you do, because you're always going to bring your own nuance and your own spin and your own, it's going to be something unique that no one else can replicate, and it's going to touch someone in a way that no one else can touch them. Mm-hmm. So I just say, it's, as I said before, I don't have a ton to give you in terms of like business insider knowledge, because I haven't tried to make it work like that yet. But just from a passion point, from a writing point, you just follow the story. If it won't let you go, it's for a reason. It's supposed to connect with someone. It's supposed to reach someone. And so I'm going to mute myself for just a second, because there's a bunch of people coming through this door.
No problem. We'll be back. Interlude.
If I may,
I'm in an echoey room, and so I'm trying to give it time. But as far as the what was the other one? Oh, staying motivated. And so it's what Rachel is saying. For myself, I can't not write. Like, and what she was saying, like, there's no feeling like when you nail something in a scene, or like a dialogue or a description, like something. There's nothing like that for me. Like, those gems are kind of rare. They're rarer than I would like them to be in terms of the overall process when it's writing, revision, or whatever. But sometimes when I hit gold, there's nothing else like it. Nothing else compares. And those are the moments where I'm like, I would gladly do all the years of work over again just to have this moment. And so for me, it's partly like, it's my passion, but then also one thing that really helped me was just, it sounds cliche, but learning how to live life also. So I could continue learning from life and continue drawing from life and my life and the lives of people around me. I've heard it said in a couple different ways that you have to have lived a life to tell a story, like an impactful story. And I'm very good at just pushing and just driving to get something done. And that doesn't, at least for me, it does not produce my best work. And so I've realized that it's very important for me to draw from. Like, I really like photography. And so it's important for me every once in a while to set the laptop down and just go out and just take some photos and just explore nature and do something different, a different kind of art, because that will refresh me to come back and it will revitalize my writing. So yeah, every once in a while, just, it's okay to take a break from the story and go and do something that really excites you, something else that really excites you, and then come back and it'll be 10 times better. At least for me, I've just learned that part of what keeps me inspired and focused and engaged is having enough time away from the writing to recharge.
That's interesting. Definitely. One question I wanted to ask very quickly is from a sort of content creator sort of place for you guys in the indie community. Obviously, I'm one person. There's quite a few of us guys out there that you see coming up time and time again on social media. We're trying our best to get the visibility out there for the books. We're trying to talk about you guys. We're trying to plug everything to do with you guys. We're trying to just get your work out there, get everything to do with your work out there. Is there anything specifically for people like me that can help you more than what we're doing at the moment? What is the best thing that us as reviewers, content creators, ARC reviewers, readers, anything, is there anything at all that you need us guys to do that would really, really help you sort of, you know, get more visibility on your books? I mean, is it reviews that you need? Is it, you know, book sales? You know, what is it you need from us guys? What's the best thing that we can do for you? If that makes sense.
Just mentioning our books and getting us out there. The biggest single hurdle for any writer, trad or indie, is visibility. I run ads, and when I run ads, I sell a lot of books because if people see my book, a certain percent of them will click, and a certain percent of that percent will buy. But it doesn't matter how awesome my cover is or how good my writing is if no one knows I exist. So just mentioning books, anything like that is super duper duper helpful. Though one thing that actually as an author I would love is if people can make their contact information easier to find. But I understand why people hide it sometimes, because there are a lot of indie authors and not all of them are well behaved. Please be better behaved, indie authors. You're making us look bad. Stop it. But you know, I think all of you have done an amazing job in the indie community that has grown up, and the support. Because when I first went indie, I was very afraid that I had killed my career. Because I had a trad career and it was fine, but indie has brought me so much more joy and just more fun, and the ability to control things myself, because I'm kind of a control freak, has really been great. And just so to have that support and to have my book out there on numerous channels is enormously helpful. And thank you very much.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those where we want to do more for you guys, but there's only so much we can do as well. Do you know that way? But
because look at that cover. Everyone should see this. It's so
I love that cover.
It's the best cover I've ever had.
Oh.
And like, I hired this artist. I made this cover, and I am so proud of that.
Proud. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was a graphic artist and graphic designer rather before I became a writer, and that is a fantastic first job, by the way. If you're planning this.
Yeah. So proud of you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Congrats. So
I love
proud. Well done.
I can brag on that. I just love that cover.
Nick, what about you? What do you think? You know, is there anything more we can do?
I think it's what you're already doing. It's very hard to say that. What's happening, I think, is that, as Rachel was saying, the indie community is exploded, really, in terms of the number of people.
Massively. Yeah, I mean, I'm really going at the moment, but there's a lot of visibility already out there. I feel that way, you know, definitely.
And I think it's those people who are doing I'm bombarded regularly with the payment for reviews and all that type of thing, which we just, we push away and we carry on. And it's those people who are giving their time because they enjoy it, because they're engaged with it, and making us visible. That's vital for getting people like me and the rest of us seen out there, because there is a variety of, we talked about genres before, but there's such a variety of readers out there who either read widely or don't go outside of their set bunch of authors. And it's actually that visibility, that contact, that time that you dedicate to the books is really, really important. And I think the part of that as well is the time given to the book. So when you're talking about it, the time you spent reading it, the fact you can talk about the content of it, not just here you go, nice. I mean, it is a very, very beautiful cover, Rachel, and it's a very, very good book. Just finished a few weeks ago. Honestly, it is. But you've got that moment, haven't you, where they're showing your book, when it's that sincerity of, this was an amazing book. And it's that being the people who show those books and dedicate their time to the books with that sincerity is vital, which you obviously you do, and the rest of them do. But it's that part of it compared to the people who contact you for paid reviews and all those types of things that go on, where there's no sincerity there. It's that balance between that of what you give that has helped me certainly in terms of my developing, getting the book seen. Those are the things to continue, and the more people like you are doing that, the better the industry will be.
Good. I'm glad. Good.
I think that I can't think of anything that the indie supporters aren't doing currently. The reviews, the love that they just give to the books, and the enthusiasm is kind of just unbelievable. And I appreciate all of that. I know everybody else in the indie community and the writer side of it super appreciates that. I'm pretty sure audiences do as well. Just keep loving the books. That's all I can, that's all I can say.
As long as you keep writing them.
I think we've all determined it's pretty much a pathological need at this point to keep writing them. So I don't think you have to
Yeah.
This is a great panel today. This is a great round table because you guys are all on the same page. Morgan, what about yourself?
I would say kind of what it sounds like everyone else has been saying. I mean, just sharing about books that you enjoy, just sharing, posting a review about them and sharing on social media, just telling friends, whoever else is interested in reading, this is a great book. I have loved this book, and here's why, and I think it would be a good fit for you too. Just that kind of interplay, that exchange between readers and authors I mean, I didn't know that existed before I kind of tried the indie scene. And, you know, I was at Dragon Con last year, the first con I've ever been to. But it was awesome because that's what it felt like. The whole community was like that. Everyone was just very passionate about stories and about books that they were into. And, you know, it didn't matter if it was trad or indie or whatever. Everyone was like, this is a great book. Check this out. This is awesome. And everyone was approachable and personable. And I think with social media and with all the different ways to reach readers and all the different ways you can have conversations now, you can do all kinds of formats to reach readers and to be personable and have conversations about what you like and why. So, yeah, I think that it's great. The best thing is just to share about a book that you enjoyed and share it with people you think would also enjoy it. And that helps the reader, that helps the author, helps everyone.
Brilliant. Good. Okay. I've always just wanted to ask that question. So I'm glad, sort of. Two more questions, and then we'll finish yourselves off, because I could just keep talking all night, to be honest with you. But Zombie Horror Novel by Rachel would be such an amazingly different story. Write it, Rachel. Write it.
It would be. Let me tell you, that book would be amazing. But it has other. I am actually planning to do fantasy. Fun little. Okay, so fun little side note. I've been writing urban fantasy for a very long time now. And when I started writing urban fantasy, everyone kind of told me, don't write urban fantasy, it's dead. And I made a career writing urban fantasy, but urban fantasy has gone out of fashion. And it's kind of like, what do you do when your ideas are out of fashion? And I actually wrote Hell for Hire, that kind of not knowing if it was going to, because it is an urban fantasy, very much set in Seattle, modern day, about witches and demons. It's very fun, but urban fantasy has been kind of eaten by paranormal romance. It used to be that paranormal romance was urban fantasy with romance. Now urban fantasy is paranormal without romance. It's switched. And it's very difficult to kind of get readers in the genre, because readers have kind of forgotten the genre exists and they're not searching for it. They're not actively looking it out. And fantasy is having a big moment. And I'm also, as someone who's been doing this now for a very long time, I'm kind of running out of urban fantasy ideas. And so I'm like, well, let's play with different toys. And fantasy is actually what I will probably write after my Tear Down Heaven series is completed. That's my current, so you heard it here first. That is my current plan. And I have several different things I'm playing with, though I might just write the zombie novel because it's going to be super awesome. I have it like all planned out, actually, because I kind of got it was one of those ideas where you saw everything exactly perfect. Then I just frantically wrote down like what was going to happen, and then never touched it again. It's just sat there. You know, someday.
Definitely. Hopefully soon. Right. One of the most amazing questions I've ever had on any of these lives, and it's going to make you guys think for a second. If you could borrow one other indie author's character to cameo in your current next book, who would you pick and why? Can I just say, Annette's a really cool supporter of my channel and everything that I do. She's in my indie book club and everything. So shout out to Annette. That's a fantastic question, guys, I think. So I need to think about it.
I would honestly pick any of T. Kingfisher's characters. I discovered Ursula Vernon through my kids' books, my son's books. He was reading the Danny Dragon Breath series, and I'm helping him read them. And I'm like, these books are amazing. And then I started reading her adult series, which are written under T. Kingfisher, and starting with Clockwork Boys, which I think is just a brilliant novel. And the way she writes these hot mess characters that are so unique and so different, and yet so human and so relatable. Really, any of her characters, I think, would get along very well with my characters, except for I'm pretty sure that I'm not dark enough to play in that game. My characters seem to be happy, light people. So.
Yeah.
But that would be my answer. T. Kingfisher, which is kind of a cheat because she's like really, really popular now. So.
Kate, though? Anyone else?
Yeah, well, you've just dropped that one. So that's, I'm sat there going, can I remember the names of characters? No.
If they're not my characters, who even are they?
I'll just steal your book and just use that instead. I've just recently read Callus and Crow by D.B. Rook, where we have it's a Western fantasy steampunk mashup, which was very different. And he had there's two vampires within that, one an older one and one who develops during the book. And those two characters would fit very, very nicely in my book 2 and book 3 of the Warriors of Spirit and Bones that I'm writing at the moment. So very much a redemption arc for the development of Western vampires. Very, very good book, very interesting, very written in a very different way. But those have got a very strong basis of why they act as they are in terms of the older vampire Callus, whereas Crow is on a development path that you see all the way through the book, and that watching that development path was quite a fascinating thing. And that would be the type of character I'd like to build into mine. Now that I remember their names.
That's good. William, Morgan, any of you guys?
I can go unless you got one.
I mean, I'd have to bend a bunch to get this. Okay, so I'm reading a series called The Ships of Britannia right now. And I really enjoy the Raven character from that series, the Master Mage Raven. And I think that his wisdom, his tragic story, and his sheer snarky, his snark and his abilities are just amazing to me. Though my universe doesn't really have magic in it. I would love to just open a portal and just have him walk through it into my universe and see how that works. He's the nature of the character is magnificent. And I would love to see that old wizened man, using an ability that nobody else understands, have to deal with my teenage psionic girl dealing with an ability that nobody really understands. And so I think that those two on an adventure together would be amazing to write. And so I think that would be who I would choose.
That's awesome.
Morgan, any idea?
Yeah, so currently one of my recent favorites was actually the author B.S.H. Garcia wrote Of Thieves and Shadows, and I just found all her characters interesting. Her prose was just bingeable, I couldn't stop reading it. And so I'm in the middle of her advanced reader copy of Love and Loss, which is the sequel, and one of the characters that really stands out is Lumira, and it's like a cat race. And so she has so many things going for her. I mean, my favorite animal is a tiger. Cats of any kind, lions, tigers, cheetahs, leopards. I mean, they're the perfect combination of just majestic, strong, agile, sleek. It's beautiful. And so it's a cat race. And her personality, she's very snarky. She's very quick-witted. She's very kind of, I'll go do this. I'll go do it my way. And if it doesn't work, then I'll call for help, kind of thing. And she kind of chafes with everyone that she gets beside. And I just think she'd be a lot of fun to throw in beside Sharla from Low Country or Megan from Die Young. I mean, it would just be a fun cast to work with. I'd love to throw her in there and see what happens, see the personalities together.
Brilliant. That's amazing. That's such a good question. You guys are legends that you were able to just throw that off your head there, because it's quite a hard question to answer. Just dropped on you. Right, last question before we're finished, I promise, because as I say, I could go on all night. Can you, not one that you've already spoken about, can you guys give me a recommendation of a book you've recently read or you've absolutely loved or you would like to recommend to the guys in the comments, or just me? Can you give me even a couple of recommendations, whatever you think, but is there anything that's really stood out recently that you haven't spoken about already?
I'll start. I picked up this book. It's called Frostbite by Angela Sylvain, and it is Sylvain. It is a spectacular book. It reminds me of old early '90s, late '80s B-budget horror movies like Critters and stuff like that. It's basically that with alien-infected prairie dogs in the North Dakota town. It's spectacular.
Wow.
So I really enjoyed that one. I've been finished Nick's book, his last one, The Scorching. I don't know if it's not his last one, but it's hard to keep up, and I really enjoyed that one. I enjoyed the concept of the world, especially the Josh's octopi friend. I thought that was and that relationship, that connection, I thought was interesting to read about. Yeah, those would be the two that I could think of right off the top of my head. I mean, I could go reach back further, but I get into some stuff that I'm not sure if the author is indie or not, because I was reading before I got super deep into the indie section.
Yeah. Brilliant. Great.
I just went and looked it up to make sure I got the title correct. Yeah. But Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons was one that Mihir recommended to me, and I did indeed love it. It was adorable, and all the books are good. It's very charming. I've actually been on a kind of a cozy, charming kick. To that end, actually. So this is the opposite of indie. But I recently went back and reread a lot of Laura Ingalls Wilder's books. I loved them as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of curious if they held up. And they held up. They're actually, I feel, much better as an adult because there's so much more I understand.
Yeah.
And I mentioned actually before the stream started that I moved to Colorado. And so reading about someone who also had moved out west had kind of a new ring to it because I had recently, obviously not in a covered wagon, but I had recently, come to an entirely new biome. And I really feel there's a great, and it's on sale. So that's awesome. And it says down in the comments, Miss Percy's is on sale. So don't miss it. It's really, really good. So charming, but there is absolutely a world of classics so if you remember a book that you read like in high school, give it a try as an adult. It's a totally different book. And I can't believe it took me so long to realize this because there are so many books that I read and I put in my mental shelf and just never looked at again. But there are real hidden depths to books that you really liked as a kid. And when you come back to as an adult, you're like, oh, I never realized that was what it was about. So that's kind of my recommendation. Go give some of your old favorites another look.
Okay.
Sometimes they're very surprising.
Well, it was difficult because I'm trying to think off the top of my head the ones I just read recently. So there's Icebreaker, which is in the current indie sale.
Yeah.
And I think the author's Stephen William Hanna. Which was basically a dystopian future. It's very much another mashup. I think I'm getting into a habit here. Around it's more broken down technology, trying to survive what's going on. It involves shamans. It involves some of the iconic magic that goes on, as well as technology to try and new technology developments that are very much around the steampunk type feel to them as well, trying to survive in a world that's falling apart. Set in Scotland, if I remember rightly, which is a very high recommendation, superb book. I can't remember what it's on at the moment, but check that sale out because it's still on. Really, really good. And then the other books I've been reading recently have been the McMurdo Rift series by Bradley Lejeune, space opera. Really enjoying those. A bit more escapism, which always helps. So they've been really, really good. I think they're on their third or fourth. That's a really good series to try out.
Brilliant.
Those are mine.
Thank you, Nick.
So my favorite author is Joe Abercrombie. And so he has significantly influenced what I write and why I write it. And so one of the most recent it's not even recent anymore by this point, but it has definitely stood out for me. It's David T. List, Violence and Vigilance.
Yeah.
I've not seen that.
And so I've been trying to like I was saying, the best thing to do if you really like a book is just make all the noise about it that you can. I've been trying to put that book everywhere. Like I've been talking to everyone about it, just because I had so much fun with it. It's like if you like the prose, the writing of Abercrombie, but you like more the pacing of John Gwynne, like a little bit faster, a little bit tighter. At least that's how I think of John Gwynne comparatively. And it's like those two sandwiched together. And it has a totally unique magic system. It's like he doesn't even get into all the intricacies of it in that first book. It's just hinted at all these different layers to it. And it has to do with like songs and harmony and hitting certain resonances. And so it's a lot of fun. The characters are very interesting. There are a lot of great emotional moments, and it moves fast. It's just a fun ride. I had a lot of fun with it. So that is my indie pick that still stands out after months ago that I read it.
Morgan, funny enough, Annette just said that Stephen William Hanna's fantasy book, The First Will, is fantastic too. So it might be something to check out, maybe, So that's cool.
That one.
Yeah, that's
Sounds
cool.
great.
I'm making a note of these too, just in my phone and my notepads. What do you think?
Everyone, like all of the books that you all listed sounded fantastic. Like it's like what they were saying earlier, the TBR is just crushed. Anytime you get a round table like this, like that's what was cool about this round table is like I knew all of you guys kind of like on the peripheral. But then before we got into the video, I was like looking each of you up to refresh and see what you all had put out. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's another whole slew of books now that I have to get through because they all look so fantastic. It just never ends. It's a great time to be alive as a SFF enthusiast.
I was just about to say, Morgan, that the quality of indie book writing and the quality of some of the books that I've read recently are high level. They're just top level. There's just some really, really, really amazing books out there that I've said before, I'm only dipping my toe in. Like I haven't even started. I haven't even got, this is the start of my sort of journey into getting to know you guys and getting to know your, the writing and all of these books. It's brilliant. I love it. This is my passion. Where you're talking about your passion with the writing, my passion is just reading these books and yeah.
Well, I think that the most fun thing for me as a reader for indie books, because I read a lot of indie, is that indie writers don't know what they can't do. And so I will see the most amazing surprises in indie books, because you do a lot of writing, you do a lot of reading, you start to see the code. And in indie books, and while there are lots and lots of traditionally published books that I read that are great, they're fantastic. I mean, they got published for a reason, they're popular for a reason. But some of the most memorable things that I've ever read have been in indie books.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll read it, maybe the writing isn't, deathless prose, but they'll have just the most bonkers awesome ideas. And you're just like, this is phenomenal. I could read this forever. Just the creativity and just the people who don't know what they can't do. They're just doing stuff. And it feels like you're on the Wild West frontier of creativity and fiction. And as a writer, I love that. I can't get enough of seeing what crazy stuff people are coming up with. It's very exciting to me. Because like a lot of times I get the feeling, that feeling like I've already read this book. I haven't read it, but I've already read it. And I hate that.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that brings me to indie, especially like some of the more bonkers parts of indie, like lit RPG or progression fantasy, these people are doing just off the wall stuff. And I love it. I love the big premises, even when they don't quite deliver, because sometimes they'll have a great idea and won't quite get there. But even then I don't regret reading it, because you get to see something absolutely bananas. And when you've read a lot of books, that is very exciting.
Yeah, I definitely notice. I do a lot of I work for not work for, but I review and read for 4 traditionally published companies out there, and I've been doing that before I even started looking at the indie stuff in the indie community, and the differences between those books, the 2 sets of books are just night and day. Literally, the flexibility in an indie book, but I think it's the same for indie films as well. So, like films that haven't been picked up by big, studios can cross that line. You can go past the line and run with it. And just if this is what you want to do, you can write it. Go ahead. It's fantastic. Where I think traditionally published books, as you say, they've been picked up for a reason, but they seem almost stricter on what they're writing, if that makes sense. There's not as much.
They're bought by publishers, which means one publisher is deciding, or 5 big publishers really are deciding what gets published. And so you're kind of in their taste. And of course, it's their job to know what's popular. But sometimes what you want isn't what's popular. Sometimes you want that crazy flavor that most people don't want, but you want it. And then it's your favorite thing.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest things about indie is that it allows mid-list authors to make a living, and it allows people who don't sell a lot of books to make enough money to keep producing books. And you have this incredible proliferation of just amazing ideas and people just out there doing whatever they can get away with. And it is very exciting and creative. And as someone who does this also, I love to see it. I love to see what other authors are coming up with, because sometimes I'll be like, I never even thought of doing it that way, especially some structural stuff I've seen. It's been very exciting.
It just draws back on that. It's a great time to be alive, really. It's a great time to be part of the indie community, and it's a great
time to be a writer. Pretty
much.
Yeah,
absolutely. Really yes. I totally agree with that. Well, just coming off that then, if you're happy enough, we'll finish it here. This was fantastic this evening. I have really enjoyed these chats this last 3 weeks. They seem to be going so well that authors are approaching me and asking me to go on into September. So we're right up to the end of September for another 4, which is cool.
Yes.
So
That's awesome.
I'm never going to say no. It's just one of those things where I'll just never say no, because it's an hour out of my week where I can speak to and pick your brains and just chat about your books. And again, there may not be a lot of people coming over to the lives, but I do find a lot of the time that people will come back to the channel and watch them, and you will get a lot of visibility there. So yeah, just to say thanks to everyone in the comments for the questions. Thanks you guys for coming on. It really does mean the world to me that you've taken time out of your day. I know you're busy, and it's not always easy just to be able to come and hang out with someone that you've never met before, let alone chat to them on the internet. So yeah, thank you so much. But with that, we'll end the live here, and thank you everyone. Thank you so much.